If you look around my office, you might realize I have kind of a love for dark, twisted cartoons. And a lot of that may be because I grew up with a lot of dark, twisted cartoons. Now, I'm not talking about the ones like Batman or ones that were meant for older kids. I'm talking about the ones that were meant for little kids, and they probably should have been made for little kids. And I loved the hell out of them. I enjoyed how much they scared me. I loved how every time you got through one, you felt a little tougher. So I'm doing a series reacting and reviewing them. We're gonna analyze how creative they are, how dark they are, and if the dark, twisted tone was warranted. So join me in taking a look at some Dark Toons. By popular demand, this is Freaky Fred from Courage the Cowardly Dog. Show about a dog who is cowardly, named Courage. I didn't see every cartoon! Freaky Fred premiered on Cartoon Network December 3rd, 1999. And while I didn't watch much of Courage, I think I was going into college at the time, I've seen this episode because it was recommended so much, and I can say it's definitely worth analyzing. Let's take a look.
We interrupt this program.
The initial idea of this show is nothing that new. It's about a dog who always comes across these supernatural elements. He lives with a farmer and his wife who he always tries to save from the supernatural elements, and they are never aware that anything is wrong. This is a scenario that's been done a lot. It's been done on Buttons and Mindy, it's been done in Looney Tunes. Probably the most similar is Eek the Cat, where it's a little purple cat whose owners and friends are always in trouble and they're never aware of it, and he always saves the day and he always ends up getting hurt. Very similar, but they're still pretty different. They have different feels to them. This has more of a dark, ghoulish side, where Eek was more Ren and Stimpy, eyes popping out, that kind of stuff. But if you like Courage, check out Eek. You might like it.
Hello, new friend. My name is Fred.
I like the shadow here because the rest of the bus should be in shadow or maybe even darker than him, but he's not. And this is that flexible lighting I'm always talking about. You see something like this in Lord of the Rings with the ring rays, where their faces are always covered, always in shadow, and that's just not possible. At some point, light would hit them and you would see them, but for the uncomfortableness, not seeing the entire figure, they keep it entirely in shadow. And this is how we start off here, and I think by having it where the bus isn't as dark, I think it kind of adds an extra element of comedy because he's just silhouetted already, even though it doesn't make a whole ton of sense. That's just kind of the menacing nature of what we're already being introduced to.
The words you hear are in my head. I said my name is Fred.
So I'm going to dive into this more, but I want you to keep in mind, whether you've seen this or haven't seen this, a lot of people say this is the scariest episode of Courage, and Freaky Fred is just terrifying, but if you really think about it, he doesn't do anything that menacing. It's not even really that dark. When you really think about what happens in this cartoon is not that dark. It's all about the presentation. The way it starts off immediately with the way he speaks is different from how everybody else speaks. Everyone talks pretty normal in this, but he off the bat is speaking in rhyme. He's speaking in this very elegant way, but it's also something you don't hear very often.
The story I'm about to tell, I tell you I will tell it well, and just how I've been naughty.
He always emphasizes the word naughty, and the reason that's so scary is because he's speaking in a certain way, but that one word brings special delight to him, and he says it the same way every time because he takes delight in stretching that word out because it brings him such joy, and that's a very alarming thing.
I can't wait for that wee lad Fred to arrive.
An interesting element looking back at some of these Courage cartoons is that it's one of the few bits of entertainment where it's got a lot of shadows, but it's got a lot of color too. Not just color, like very vibrant colors. And top of my head, I can't think of that many forms of entertainment that can combine them so well. Top of my head, I'm thinking Dick Tracy, Suspiria did that. And one of the reasons you don't see it often is it's very tricky to do because it doesn't make a lot of sense. Usually when you have a lot of shadows, the environment is very dark, it's not vibrant, so you usually see sort of a lot of shadows and maybe one color like blue or green or something like that. But because it's a cartoon, you can get away, like I said, with that flexible lighting, so it's really cool to see, especially in something that's as old as this is.
My heart beat fast as I drew near. I felt so nice and naughty.
One of the reasons I think people do find this so scary is because there's so much build up to it. It isn't just the fact that he speaks weird and he looks weird. He hasn't even met anyone yet. He hasn't even done anything on this bus. It's just him talking to himself. And if this is what he's like by himself, it's terrifying to think what he's like around other people. And they set up right away, he's a barber. And even though it's very unlikely kids have seen Sweeney Todd, I think there's already kind of a creepy idea about barbers, that they're people with scissors and you're in a chair and you just have to sort of let them do what they do. If they want to kill you, they could. So I think that's why a lot of kids are kind of scared of barbers sometimes. And I think this taps into a fear that is both creepy but kind of funny too. I don't know if this is a thing anymore, but hating mimes used to be a really popular joke, especially in the 90s. Like, everybody just hated mimes. I guess today it'd be living statues, which is kind of the same thing, but mimes was always sort of the go-to, oh no, not them! So if you see them in older media, it was kind of a big running joke back then.
I thought just how excited they must be that I would come today.
The way he speaks also, I don't know if this is intentional, but it's eerily similar to an Edgar Allan Poe character. I very much think Tall Tale Heart, where again, it's mostly just this person talking, saying what happened, and it's that very similar kind of both turmoil and joy at the same time. One of my favorite things, Courage is on the stairs, and when his eyes look, you hear a creak. Is that the stairs, or is that his eyes creaking? I like to think it's his eyes creaking, but again, very cleverly, I don't think they're entirely letting you know. It could be either.
A doggy dog. Like dog, he spelled. D-O-G is what he spelled.
I also like, his rhymes aren't very good. Like, why is he speaking in this way? But you know why, don't you? It brings him joy. For whatever reason, it brings him joy. There's lots of characters that have big smiles and are fine. You can see people with a very comforting smile, a welcoming smile. But with Freaky Fred, I think it's the eyes. You can pretty much take any comforting smile, but if you put intense eyes on it, it'll immediately become scary. And I think any good cartoonist, animator knows it's all in the eyes. The eyes are all you need to convey something. And I think even though the smile is great too and exaggerated, if those eyes weren't there, it wouldn't be nearly as creepy.
Would you like to freshen up?
Yes, been quite a trip, it has.
For a show that very much likes to show creepy bugs and monsters and stuff like that, again, I think for a character that's just smiling to leave the biggest impact says something. Also, the fact his expression never changes. It's always that smile. There's two terrifying things you can do with that. You can either have him keep that same expression throughout the whole thing, which I'm pretty sure they do in this, or they can have it change at one point. Imagine if he suddenly got angry and it turned into a frown. How terrifying would that be? Because you're so used to the smile. Like, if that's what the smile looks like, what does a frown look like? I think if they went really big with like creepy huge eyes or like bugs in the smile or something like that, like the show usually does, it wouldn't have been as effective. It has to be something where you feel like this person can sneak into your home and do something awful. It's just a dude, and sometimes just whatever is going inside the mind of a dude is more terrifying than any monster.
Courage.
That's kind of what I was talking about, where you have something that's established, just his voice. His voice has the same tone throughout the whole thing, so that when it suddenly dips down a little lower, where he just says his name, Courage, like that's not scary, but doing it in that lower tone where you're so used to the same thing from him all the time, you know that when something changes, it's not gonna be good, and it's unsettling.
It was a day I'd not forget. The day that I first met my pet.
Okay, so finally we're getting into a little bit of the backstory of this character and why we're supposed to be afraid of him. Even that hamster looks disturbing. I mean, this is a cartoon with cute little animals in it. They could easily make that hamster cute, but no, they had to make it this unadorable thing.
That's when I got naughty.
He actually looks cuter without the fuzz. So there you go. You have the first major naughty thing he did, and of course, like traditional psychopaths, it starts on a pet, and then it's going to move on. So we have where it started, and that's kind of funny. You shave the hamster, whatever, but where's it gonna go now?
Unfurl sweet memories of a girl and tempt me to be naughty.
Now, what am I supposed to say to that?
Barbara, my love was named.
Wonderfully exaggerated, also creepy, very much like the big eye drawings from the 50s and 60s, the kind of kitsch art that I and you probably found creepy.
Until one evening, I'm ashamed, I got a little naughty.
Obviously, there's so many ways this can be scary, but you look at what they're actually saying and showing, and nothing has happened, like, at all. Again, it's the power of suggestion. This is the part where I'm sure, like a lot of you, I got really uncomfortable and really creeped out, where I had to remind myself, it's a kid's show. They're not gonna do anything that bad. And as we see, they really don't.
I realized she needed space.
So at this point, you're finally starting to put it together. This is all it's going to be. And if you're like me, you're kind of saying to yourself, wow, how did they do this? How did they create just this uncomfortable feeling without really doing anything? That there's no monsters, there's no murders, there's not even any violence. I mean, if you were to tell someone, yeah, there's an episode about a barber who goes to Courage and shaves his fur, and he cut this little girl's hair and shaved a hamster, I mean, it's like, okay, well, that sounds goofy, silly. You wouldn't think it's the scariest episode of the show that already has a lot of creepy, scary things. 90s cell phones.
I'd never seen such hair before.
Another great element you can always add to make someone more creepy, just add sweat. I mean, there, he has the same smile as always, but you see that sweat. It's an extra element that's either extreme discomfort or even more terrifying, extreme comfort. What I also love with the awkward social norms is that he beckons him to come forward like he feels he has enough control over him that he would, enough control or trust. And again, that just shows how not on this plane he is.
That would be weird.
Even when he knows the jig is up, he's still so happy. There is something so uncomfortable about not people being happy, but people who are happy all the time. There's no acknowledgement of other emotions. I feel like people want to be balanced. They don't like sad or angry emotions, but you need them. They're very important. And when someone just completely denies that and erases it from their consciousness, you know there's something off about them and that something bad can come from them.
Then my landlords did presume.
For those wondering why there's not a straitjacket on him, I think that's supposed to be like a barber cloth, like you put around someone when you cut their hair, because again, this is for mentally ill barbers, so I think that's the joke there.
And farewell, Courage. What's the harm if I was slightly naughty?
Alright, as much as I love this cartoon, there's two missed opportunities. One, I think when the door closes, they should have held on that and the ambulance driving away with him just looking at them. I think that would have been scarier. Two, that really should have said the end. It's just, or maybe not. Maybe that joke's been done too many times, but I think it would have been funnier. So there you go. That is apparently the most terrifying episode of Courage the Cowardly Dog, Freaky Fred, where almost nothing happens. A guy uses an electric shaver to shave a dog, that's it, and he gave people bad haircuts. That's it. That's not scary. But I think this cartoon should be studied about how much the delivery can just make a huge impact. I mean, again, this is a show with aliens and monsters and ghosts, but it's a dude who likes cutting hair that's the most terrifying, and he does nothing violent at all. And even compared to the other creatures, he doesn't look that terrifying, but there's something about social cues that people, even little kids, pick up on. And I think they're really exploited here to the best degree, where they try to very much just have these little clues, these creepy smiles, the eyes, the way he talks, the way he emphasizes certain words. You really don't need to do that much in terms of getting a scare across. And I think this is proof by it being the scariest episode. It's actually so scary that there is a video where they reanimated it because they're such fans of this episode and how strange it is. I really feel like this is a cartoon that should be studied and analyzed for how to do something disturbing without actually doing anything disturbing. Hey everyone, I got a couple of these lined up. If there's any particular cartoon you want me to look at as being very dark or twisted, leave it in the comments below. Again, I'm not really looking for movie scenes or cartoons meant for teenagers or older. I'm talking about ones meant for little kids, but still scare the shit out of you. Whether it's an old cartoon or a new cartoon, let me know what you want me to look at.